everyone. So I have here Mr. Syed Mubarak, Government Advocacy Chair and Head of ESG Committee ASEAN and Global of Smart Cities Network ASEAN. Good evening, sir.
Good evening too, CJ. How are you?
I'm doing good. I hope you're doing fine.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so for today, we will have this fireside chat wherein we will talk about the transitioning to net zero emissions. So this conversation will focus on industry, finance, and policy.
Very nice subject.
Yeah, so I just want to know what's your insights or thoughts about this certain topic, since this is one of the hottest issue right now when it comes to net zero or achieving net zero.
I think when you talk about net zero, the three subjects what you mentioned about it is very crucial in order for us to reach the pathway of net zero, so that the humanity can be sustained and building the sustainable future for everyone.
I guess. And actually for that one, since we talk about like these three categories, right? The industry, the finance, and the policy. So it will be needing like a support for this transition. And this actually required a cleaner and better technologies aid for the policy and for the makers and financiers and also for the government to allow sustainability to make business sense. And for this context, I guess these key issues really has a big role when it comes to net zero. So I'm just gonna ask you three questions which focus on these three contexts. Okay, so first, I just want to know, Syed, when it comes to industry, which is the focus on the business sector right now, what are actually the kinds of action in the business that will actually help you achieve zero emissions?
I think when it comes to climate change and net zero, the corporations plays a very important role. And because they really need to do the biggest task in order to mitigate the carbon emission. So for them to do, they have to start with setting a strategy and how to reduce carbon emission. Then set an action plan. So towards energy management, water conservation, and waste reduction. So that actually related to scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, which ultimately help companies to mitigate their carbon emission, where they can bring in different technology and financing aspect of it in order to achieve their goal.
Yeah, I would love to highlight how you mentioned action plan. So my next question or follow-up question, Mr. Syed, do you anticipate there being additional benefits for operations when it comes to the supply chains and also with the end consumers?
Definitely. When it comes to sustainability, being sustainable is actually more profitable. So for the corporation, at the same time, they can translate that benefit to the consumer, so that the consumers would not be too burdened with the cost. And then, they could not able to support the sustainable material or sustainable related products. So I would say that definitely there are two-way benefit, both for the companies and consumer, and ultimately for the entire ecosystem.
And do you agree, like on the second context, for financing net zero, do you believe that it really has a big role in achieving or achieving net zero right now?
Of course, without money, nothing can move, right? So the financing is very crucial, and equally for any type of project development, equally for companies or corporations or cities to transform to net zero, then there is a huge capital inflow has to be needed. So I think that's where there are different instruments are built in, like a green bond, sustainable linked loans, or green financing. So that helps companies to pursue those kind of loans from the banks, for them to put it on energy efficiency or renewable energy purchase or many other technology adoption, so that they can able to make their goal achievable.
So what are the challenges in financing this transition?
I think the challenges point of view is actually the traceability and trackability of how the proceeds are utilized. I think in that context, although there are huge issues going on from a greenwashing aspect of it, but there are new technology like a blockchain is enabling that challenges through a proper traceability mechanism so that the banks and the companies can easily secure funding and they can put the money onto the right projects, and that means those projects really gives the intended carbon reduction and achieving their goals, whether it's 2030, 2050, whatever the goals they want to achieve.
So in industry, you mentioned those action plans, and in financing, you mentioned all of the challenges and how it will able to achieve those to finance this transition. So given those actions, I believe that it will be needing a political clearance. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for this one, Syed, how can politicians work or the government to generate popular support among stakeholders and electorates and provide policy to support to accelerate this transition, specifically in net zero?
I think when it comes to sustainable development, the governments play a very important role from a policy making and process setting and enabling finance, so that the private sector can able to jump in into the bandwagon and contribute to the overall agenda set by the governments. I mean, when it comes to again net zero, because again goes back to the Paris Agreement 2015, where each government has a NDC, nationally determined contribution, that ultimately related to the carbon emission reduction. So the policy process setting is very important, and enabling finance so that corporates can do the job. But this also related to the improving quality of life of the people. That voice down to the policy makers in and getting electoral voice, and ultimately what the purpose of policymakers is, doing good for the people. And so that the cities or villages or rural development, ultimately can be sustained, and so that the future will be good for everyone.
Thank you so much, Syed. It was really and truly an honor to have this kind of conversation with you right now, since we have this event which talks about Net Zero Building and Net Zero City Summit. So may I know what's your final message to our audience?
I think this is really a great conference, talk about net zero building and net zero city. I think for that to happen, it is not just one party going to do that. It is a collective responsibility of everyone, individual, government, corporation. Everyone has to come together in achieving the goal. For that to achieve the goal, I want to make a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, that is, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the organizer, ESCOM, and Global Zero Carbon Partnership, as well as all the sponsors to make this event so successful. Without that, this event will never be achieved. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Syed, and you have a wonderful evening.
My pleasure, Siti. Thank you.